Hey guys, I'm Vicki and I own a DIY workshop and a social DIY workshop, and I'm going to be talking today about pouring paint. One of our most popular classes since we introduced it every single month. We do at least a couple of these paint pour classes. They fill up. Right now during COVID, we're getting people picking up kits as well. People that don't feel so comfortable coming in the shop, and that's perfectly fine. We're going to show two different methods today, and I always come to you from the perspective of a teacher, what I teach my guests here in the workshop, so that you'll have the gist of teaching it yourself if you're a workshop owner like me, or you'll have the basics of what you need to know if you're just a maker and you want to have some fun with pouring. So because it's October, we are going to be painting on some pumpkins, which is a 3D type of paint pour. And we've got two sizes here. I always get a nice pan. These are usually found at a dollar store, or you can find them at Walmart. They're just inexpensive cooking pans made out of tin that you can use, because a 3D pour is going to be quite a bit more paint than our flat pours, and we're going to need a reservoir for that paint to drip into, and this works perfectly. So when I teach, I explain the basics of the products we use. So one of the things that I use in my classes is Floetrol. Floetrol is a paint retarder, so it slows the dry time, and it also is a flowing medium. So it helps that paint flow so that it can circulate with other colors and create those really cool patterns that you get in a paint pour. So I use Floetrol. There are some other artists mediums that you can use for pouring. One of them is Liquitex. What I like about Liquitex is that it comes in different sheens, so you can get a gloss or a matte or whatever you're wanting the outcome to be. However, it is so much more expensive that I find Floetrol works for me, and if I want a sheen, then I put a little acrylic spray over the top of it once it's dry. So the ratio, in our shop, we use Latex Paint. So this is Sherwin-Williams brand. You can get the to-go containers pretty inexpensively, and the ratio is typically 1:1. So 1 part paint to 1 part Floetrol. If you're using a latex paint that's a little bit thicker, like an expensive brand like Behr paint that's really, really thick, you will need to thin that with water. You want the consistency of like a cake batter. Okay, let's talk about storing paint. So when you mix up your paint with Floetrol, 1 part to 1 part latex paint, and I use Sherwin-Williams to-go bottles of paint, you're gonna have some excess. And so I always keep the excess in these first in, first out bottles, FIFO bottles, they're called. And that way I always have a good supply of all different colors pre-mixed. You don't want to have to mix these in front of the guests every single color every single time. So I do have every color that I use in my pours pre-mixed ahead of time. When the group comes, we just talk about all of the fun stuff. And we're not mixing the paint with the medium. So if you're doing a to-go kit though, you'll be pre-mixing in your bottles or however you want to do it, and then placing it into to-go containers. These are just condiment containers, and these work great. So I've placed and this is a Michael's pumpkin. I got 60% off. I think full price it was $9.99, and I got it 60% off of that. So pretty affordable craft. And then I put a skewer in the top of the stem here, and I put it in there pretty solidly so that I can kind of move up and down, and I don't have to touch my art that's all over the pumpkin once I start pouring. So we'll put that here in my tin that's going to catch that dripping paint, and we'll get started with the instructions for mixing our paint. So this is a dirty pour. Now if I were to do a clean pour, I would have separate cups, or I could use these condiment containers and just pour individually 1 color at a time to create art. If I want to do a dirty pour, I always say I layer it up like lasagna. So I take about a 12-ounce cup for this smallest pumpkin, and I start by layering my pre-mixed paints. And I do a light color, and I usually start from up here. What I want to do is create some air as I'm pouring it, because what's going to happen to that air is those air bubbles are going to rise up, and it'll create some cells, which adds a lot of interest to our pour. So I start with a light color, so I started with white there. I'm going to do some dark teal now, and I'm going to give it, you know, again, some height that I'm pouring it from. And I have this, it's like a light sagey green, so I'm going back to light. I'll pour some of that in there. Now I'm going to go back to white just to add some negative space. I like to use quite a bit of white in my layering. It gives my colors places to expand into that aren't a color of their own. Now it's a pumpkin, so I'm going to use this really bright orange and pour from up here. And then I've got kind of a coral, so it's orangey but a little bit pink. And we'll just pour a little bit of that in there. Very nice. Maybe a little bit more light green, a little bit more white, one more orange, really filling this cup completely. Now what I want to do at this point, I'll throw on some gloves, is show a little patience. I don't want to stir my paints because I don't want to create a muddy color out of them. I want them to be separated so that we have a great dirty pour mix of colors flowing into each other. But I also like to create some air, and I like to partially encourage them to start flowing together. So I take a stir stick and I create a couple of X's. So one all the way down to the bottom, two, and if you have, I think two is going to be enough for this pour. If you have only a couple of colors, 2 or 3 colors, give it 3 or 4 X's. If you did a lot of layering with colors like I did, a couple X's is enough. And definitely put on gloves. This is a messy business. But the next thing I do is I let that sit for about a minute. And what that's going to allow is those air bubbles that I've actually encouraged by doing those X's all the way to the bottom, plus pouring from up high, I've encouraged a lot of air to go into my paint. And I want to relax and let that air have a chance to kind of bubble up and create some of those interesting cells. I will show you what my cup looks like. Okay, so look at all of those little circles of different color paint that are starting to rise. Those are called cells, and those are going to create a lot of interest, and that's simply from air. Now you can encourage with silicone and other products. I don't use those things at the shop, I just use air. Now that my dirty pour cup has had a chance to allow the air bubbles to rise, I'm ready to do my pour. I'm going to hold my stick here. I like the stem on this particular pumpkin. You can pour right over the stem if you don't like it, and then it all is one look, but I like to leave the stem, and I'm just going to start pouring from the top, heading down, and I'm spinning it because I'm able to hold it by my skewer. And so this is one look. You can drip it and then leave it kind of like a caramel apple here, just dripping off the ends or off the bottom and not finish it. This is a great look. But if you want to completely finish it, you can continue on with a second row You might have to bend it a little bit. And I'm bending and spinning. Here, I'll show you kind of what I'm just adding a second row. More difficult doing on camera than it's actually, there we go. And I have a little bit of paint left, and so that is 12 ounces of paint. It covers, more than covers, the small pumpkin. But if you get too excited about pouring and you pour it all out before it's all covered, you can just scoop out some of the paint that's dripped onto the bottom and hit those little spots that you may have missed. So, do I see a spot there, or is that the white? Oh, I see a spot here. So I'm going to hit that. And the rest looks good. So that is my 3D paint pour. I hope you enjoyed it. Just one more tip. If you have emptied out any of your condiment cups, you can put them upside down in your pan and then set your pumpkin on top of it so that it can continue to drip and dry. And then once dry, the plastic bends and it'll just pop right off the bottom. And you can remove your skewer at that point as well.
Guys, these really are so much fun, and you'll enjoy it just as much as your guests do. So let them know to allow it to dry for at least a couple of days, and then you can put it on your porch or make it a centerpiece on your table and enjoy it all fall. Like or comment, please, below if you have any questions, and subscribe to my channel if you find it helpful for your shop or your at-home projects. I appreciate it.